Friday. Let's go live now to Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg, who joins us as the coalition continues its response to the election and its results and trying to land a coalition agreement. Senator Bragg, thanks for your time. Before we get to the difficult issues facing the coalition, to me, it seems a no-brainer that you should mobilise around that superannuation tax plan. Surely it's something that you will all agree on.
Well, Kieran, good afternoon. The unrealised gains issue and the indexation issue of the very unfair tax will be at the focus of our effort. But there's also a massive integrity issue here that the Treasurer has not included specifically the Prime Minister's scheme in the legislation. It does exist in some form in some regulations, but the Senate should be able to see the bill in total, including an idea of what the Prime Minister will have to pay.
Okay, so the government says that those on defined benefit schemes, including Prime Ministers and long-term MPs, they will be caught up in it. It's only state MPs, some state MPs, premiers and officials that won't be because of constitutional restrictions. You don't buy that?
Well, this is a massive conflict of interest. Jim Chalmers is saying he wants to set the Prime Minister's pension arrangements subsequent to the Senate debate on the bill. I think that is ridiculous. He should put the Prime Minister's scheme in the bill with the detail, the calculation methodology, but also be able to tell people how much tax Mr Albanese will be paying once this is enforced, if the Senate agrees to it.
When you say the Prime Minister's scheme, it's not just him. There are many Liberals who would also be caught up in that.
Well, he's the Prime Minister of the country. He wants to introduce a new tax, and apparently his Treasurer will subsequently set the tax arrangements for his own personal arrangements. This is a howling conflict of interest, and the only way it can be resolved is to see the tax arrangements for the Prime Minister and other politicians to be put into the bill itself before the Senate.
Okay, so you're not... first of all, you don't have the numbers to block it. So how do you put the heat on the government to say, don't just wave this through with the Greens, we want greater transparency?
Well, this is a massive integrity issue, and I'll be talking to my Senate colleagues about this because I don't think it's reasonable that the Senate would be asked to consider a bill without the arrangements for the politicians' tax. I think it's very unfair that for Australians at large, their arrangements will be set in the primary bill largely, but for the politicians, it'll be done in the regs sometime in the future. I think that's very crooked.
On the issue of unrealised gains, if you can already tax larger accounts at 15%, the concessional rate which currently exists, why can't it simply be increased at a certain point, $3 million in this instance, to 30%, which the government still argues is concessional, on the same basis?
Well, it could be increased, and in fact, the government may want to increase the rate or lower the threshold if they are to do a deal with the Greens to pass this through the Parliament. And once the principle of unrealised gains is a feature of Australian tax law, I think it's a very dangerous position for the country because we risk losing more investment and new ideas.
Do you think this is a deliberate attempt to try and, keep a lid on how much concessional treatment of super there is in the system and essentially get people to pay more tax via removing their funds, their nest egg, out of superannuation before it hits the $3 million mark?
Well, I think the main issue here is that the budget is out of control. You've got 10 years of deficits. This is the government's primary new tax measure. Because of the failure to index it and because of its application to unrealised gains, it is going to yield a large amount of revenue. And that's why it's very important that this very bad tax be significantly changed at worst, because it would inject a huge amount of risk into the economy, which is already pretty anemic. I mean, private investment is pretty flat in this country, so the prospect of a new tax is a very serious one.
Do you believe that the point that's been made, and Andrew Clennell reporting the last 24 hours about this, that state MPs can't be caught up in the scheme because of constitutional restrictions? Do you accept that?
Well, there are constitutionally protected schemes that won't be subject to this tax, but I don't think Mr Chalmers has actually read the detail here, because it's very unclear how it would apply to certain judges, be they federal or state. Apparently, federal judges won't pay unrealised gains while they are employed, but that's an open question as to whether that also applies to the politicians like Mr Albanese. So it is very muddled.
So when you say it's an open question, you don't believe the government in saying, because I had Don Farrell on earlier, the Trade Minister, reiterating that federal politicians, where it's applicable with the defined benefit scheme, including the Prime Minister, will be hit by this. You don't accept that. You don't believe it.
Well, if it's true, then put it in the bill. Amend the bill and show us the calculation method. And separately, the Treasurer should be able to say how much tax the Prime Minister would be paying in year one of his pension. Now, he says that he doesn't know what the pension would be, but in his own explanatory memorandum to the bill, he has
You're saying if it's true.
If it's true, he has 5 different examples of how the tax could work for different people of different balances, varying a number of accounts. So the Treasury and the Treasurer can do
so
this
you don't
analysis.
Believe them on it?
Well, why are they hiding behind all this detail and bureaucracy? They should have put the primary information in the bill and then separately say how much tax it would cost.
Let me ask you about net zero. Should the coalition maintain a commitment to net zero by 2050?
Well, as you know, this is under review, but the primary task here is to reduce emissions, but also to ensure that you can get stable and reliable power to industry and households.
What do you think? Should you keep that commitment?
Well, we're a trade-exposed nation. Being part of international agreements to reduce emissions has been a long feature of Australian policy, but we have to resolve that the implementation of net zero or any other commitment is in Australia's interest, and that's why we respect...
Do you think it is? Do you believe net zero by 2050 is in the national interest?
Well, if you want to reduce emissions, you need to do it as part of a global compact. So, of course, but you need to do it in a way that suits your own domestic conditions. And under Labor, what we've seen is skyrocketing power prices. So we need to look at how we actually achieve it.
So no question of pulling out of Paris in your mind. There'd be no way the Liberals would countenance that.
Well, how else would you cut emissions? I mean, you've got to be part of a global agreement if you want to cut emissions, and then you've got to ensure that you can implement that agreement in a domestic way which suits your own conditions.
Andrew Bragg, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kieran.
Coming up next, we'll have the latest on the weather warnings issued for parts of northern New South Wales.